Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Female Kyuubi gives Naruto a bloodline that can charm any female. Part 2, hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. She covertly looked at him, surprising herself, as she wished to be on a team with the blonde-haired shinobi. Well, he seems like a nice guy. Suddenly a raven-haired young man, who looked like someone had just murdered his dog in front of him, came up to them, and scowled at the blonde. Dope, fight me, I'm going to destroy you. Oh come on Uchiha theme. Can't you leave me alone for one day? Are you scared of me? You're just a demon brat after all. Suddenly the temperature in the room dropped by 20 degrees. What did you call me team? A demon brat? Why is there something wrong with that? Suddenly a flash of bright light appeared, and Naruto was holding a glowing blade at the neck of Uchiha, drawing blood. Sasuke hissed, as Naruto withdrew the blade. Suddenly he punched the Uchiha in the gut, sending the Uchiha straight through the wall, before he slammed into a tree with tremendous force, spider cracks appearing in the tree, as the Uchiha suddenly coughed up blood. He walked back to his seat, and saw her looking at him with wide eyes, and a hint of fear. His face fell, as he registered the fear in her face. I see, you scared of me now, I'll leave you alone. He turned away from her, as she registered the pained look on his face. She suddenly felt like she had done something terrible. She grabbed his hand, blushing at her own actions, and spoke to him in a kind voice. It's okay, I'm not afraid of you. She raised an eyebrow at the look of slight relief on his face, as he smiled at her, making her feel all warm inside. Why am I feeling like this? I only met him 5 minutes ago. He sat down next to her, a bit closer to her than he was before. She thought nothing of it. He smiled to himself, deciding to remind them that the term for the bet is almost over. Hey girls, the day after tomorrow is the day the bet is decided, so meet me at training ground 7 at 10 in the morning, alright? Yes, Naruto-kun. Himiko looked confused at this. What is Naruto-kun? A month ago I promised to go on a date with the strongest fangirl in 1 month. She wasn't happy with that at all, and frowned at him, thinking he was just picking a girl, as if he was picking dinner. Why would you do that, Naruto? You shouldn't pick a woman just because of a bet. They said I would pick the winner. Remember Himiko-chan, they're fangirls. They don't train at all, but they'll do anything to be a ninja like me. This results in weak ninja who may very well die in any serious mission. This is indirectly my fault since they're neglecting their training in favor of fawning over me. If they would die because they weren't trained enough, I would feel guilty. I'm simply motivating them to train hard. Then again, I might have to hold these kinds of things often, and I don't think if I had a girlfriend that she would agree. I'm basically sacrificing my possible love life to save their lives. Don't think of me as a shallow boy, Himiko-chan. It hurts me when a non-fangirl says those things. Because you aren't blinded by blind love. She blushed at the suffix, but couldn't help but agree with his reasoning. It would be partially his fault if they died because they were fawning over him all the time. Her blush deepened, as she realized she had started to appraise him as a future mate. I'm sorry Naruto-kun, I thought you were just using them as a way of entertainment. No Himiko-chan, I will probably end up with multiple women because of my bloodline, but I will not use a woman like she is a show you can enjoy for 10 bucks. It truly hurts me that you would think that, he said, sounding disappointed in her. She couldn't help but feel ashamed, as she had passed judgment on someone without knowing the circumstances. Then she blushed, as she registered the multiple women comments. I'm sorry Naruto-kun, it's alright, I admit that it sounds a bit weird if you don't know the circumstances. You know, this is the first conversation I've had with a girl in 3 weeks without her trying to jump my bones. I must admit it's refreshing. I like you Himiko-chan. She smiled, as she suddenly felt her heart flutter. Though she had no idea what this meant, she knew that it had something to do with the hot blonde in front of her. Suddenly the class quieted, as Iruka walked in, and started holding a speech about the hard life of a shinobi. Himiko smiled at the blonde next to her, who simply rolled his eyes, and sighed, before giving her a foxy grin, which gained a blush from her. Alright Team 7. Naruto Uzumaki, Himiko Arasawa, and Sasuke Uchiha under Kakashi Haddock. Naruto smiled at her, before scowling at the Uchiha. He really didn't want to have to deal with his attitude on a daily basis, however Himiko intrigued him to no end. He wanted to see if he could gain her love without resorting to the charm, however he wanted her, so he would use it if it was necessary. After the team assignments were complete, Sakura suddenly screamed, ringing the ears of all those present. Hey, why don't I have a team? I'm sorry Sakura, but you have been deemed unworthy of becoming a genin. You'll have to try again in 6 months, Iruka said, which made Naruto chuckle, causing her to scream at him loudly, which earned her a glare which could kill small animals. Team 7 was waiting for their sensei to arrive. It had been an hour already. Sasuke was shamelessly ogling Himiko, a hungry expression on his face. Himiko was frightened by this, and drew closer to Naruto. She was hiding behind him, as he scowled at the Uchiha. Naruto suddenly turned around, and took her in his arms. She looked at him in slight shock, as well as a bit of admiration, and a slight hint of lust. He whispered in her ear. The warm breath on her ear making her shudder, as her eyes glazed over slightly. Don't worry Himiko-chan. I won't let him touch you. If he does, I'll kill him. Hey dope, what are you doing to my new girl? Naruto roughly turned around. Himiko still settled in his arms, as she shuddered in disgust, before settling in his arms, placing her head in the crook of his neck with a content sigh. She felt his power rise, as he scowled at your girl Sasuke. Girls are not property. He spat the words out, venom lacing his every word, making the Uchiha shrink a bit, before scowling back at him. Well, she's still my girl dope. I'm an elite, an Uchiha, any hot woman belongs to me. Is that so? Well, she seems more comfortable in my presence, don't you think? He said, kissing her forehead. Hearing a slight gasp before she nuzzled her head deeper in the crook of his neck. She's way too hot for you. I'm superior. Sasuke began, an unmasked threat in his words. If you ever touch her, I'll kill you, and if this village tries to stop me, I'll destroy the village, as well. She didn't know why, but she felt completely at ease with him. Nevertheless, she was quite shocked, as he threatened the entire village in case she was hurt. Does that mean he likes me? I wouldn't object actually. He's strong, caring, intelligent, and hot. The council will give her to me to please me. I will have her dope. Suddenly their sensei entered the room, whistling at the position of two of his teammates. Suo, I thought you only met her today. Whatever, meet me on the roof in 5. As he poofed away, Naruto held her closer to him, eliciting a faint moan, before a bright flash of light, reappearing in another flash on the roof. Startling as after a flash of light the teenagers stood, still in an embrace. He sweat dropped, and asked them why they weren't walking up to the roof. Naruto simply looked up at him, and deadpanned. Why would I? I'm comfortable like this. Causing a blush to appear on Himiko's face. As Sasuke finally made his way up to the roof after 3 minutes, the blonde finally released her, catching a whimper at the loss of contact. They sat down for introductions. Alright everyone, tell me your name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, and dreams, and anything we should know. I'll start. My name is Kakashi Haddock. I have lots of likes, and many dislikes. I also have a couple of hobbies. I don't feel like telling you my dreams. Alright, your turn, Prince Charming. Naruto grinned at him. Alright, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like training, and Himiko-chan. I hate emo Avengers who lust after girls, and think that they can have them just because they want. I don't really mind fangirls, though they annoy me at times. My hobbies are training with my light chakra, and certain activities that I will not disclose to you yet. I dream to be accepted, and be loved. I am the only possessor of the light alignment, which makes me powerful through its excellent defense, attack, and speed. Kakashi's eyes widened at the mention of a unique form of chakra that, according to the blonde, is really powerful. Alright, you next brooding guy. Sasuke glared at Kakashi before using his HN technique, and began speaking. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I hate many things, and like almost nothing, I want to revive my clan, and kill a certain person. I also want Himiko, and I shall have her. At this, Kakashi's sweat dropped, as Himiko shivered in disgust, and quickly went to Naruto, who immediately took her in his arms, whispering soothing words in her ear. After a few minutes she finally calmed down, and nuzzled into him, blushing at the hardness of his chest and abdomen. When she finally released him, she looked wary of Sasuke, and sat right next to Naruto, on the other side, so that Sasuke wouldn't be able to get near her, before starting her introduction. My name is Himiko Arasawa. I like training, and Naruto-kun. I dislike the pervert creep Uchiha, and people who reject other people for things that they have no control over. My dream is not yet clear to me, but I'm beginning to get an idea, she said, glancing over at Naruto before continuing. I hail from the Arasawa clan, which was originally from Kiri, but I fled here when the clans started getting exterminated. My clan was comparable to the Inuzuka, and only different because we use cats in battle instead of dogs, and that our clan has no problems with male polygamy. Unfortunately, all our nin cats died when we fled. Naruto mentally grinned at the mention of polygamy. She could definitely be one of his girls without him having to charm her. He just had to play it right. Alright, then meet me tomorrow at 8 AM at training ground 4 for your test. And don't eat breakfast, you may puke. Kakashi then poofed away, leaving his students with the rest of the day off. Naruto instantly turned to Himiko, and asked her if she wanted to go grab some lunch with him, which she accepted eagerly with a blush on her face. Naruto took her in his arms once more before flashing away in a bright light. Inside of the seal, Harumi simply giggled at the antics of her master. Oh my master, you certainly have become quite the charmer. I can't wait for your next visit. She smiled a lustful smile, her eyes filled with love at the very thought of her master. She would have never expected it, but the boy seemed to have an effect on her, as if she was hypnotized. Oh master, I love you so. The next day, training ground 4, Himiko and Naruto had hung out all afternoon, and she quickly started receiving jealous glares from 80% of the women. She was a bit confused at this. Did every woman in this village want Naruto? She wasn't very far from the truth, as Naruto had now charmed 80% of the women in Konoha. Naruto arrived with Himiko in his arms in a bright flash of light, before they lay down against a tree. Traveling with Naruto's power was quickly becoming her favorite way of transportation for other reasons than the time she saved. She realized she may have feelings for the boy, something anybody else would have noticed a long time ago. After 15 minutes, Sasuke arrived at the training ground, scowling at the pair before jumping up into the tree they were residing under. Enjoy her while you can dope, she will soon be mine. Himiko shuddered with disgust and slight fear. She held Naruto closer, who was glad to oblige, as he soothed her with his presence, whispering small words into her ear, making her blush prettily. Though no one could hear what he was saying, it was obvious, as she relaxed into his embrace with a content little smile on his face. Sighing, she whispered, Naruto-kun. Naruto was also feeling rather happy. It was nice to have a girl like you without her listening to your every command. He felt slightly guilty, as with every time he soothed her, she would only grow more feelings towards him. It felt like he was manipulating her. Himiko was growing accustomed to Naruto's flirting personality, however she could feel that he was dead serious. He also felt for her. It made her happy inside to know that only shortly after she arrived in this new village, did she almost have a boyfriend who would go as far as to destroy his own village for her happiness. After a while, Kakashi arrived at the training ground, easily 2 hours late. However, Himiko and Naruto were not angry at him for being late, while Sasuke was angry and sighed. They just sighed and released each other standing up. Naruto walked up to Kakashi with Himiko and said, Sensei, couldn't you have waited another 30 minutes? I was really comfortable with Himiko-chan. Kakashi's sweat dropped, while Himiko blushed and giggled in an approving tone, making Naruto want to do certain things to her. Whatever, the test is to get a bell from me. If you get a bell, you pass. If you don't, you get sent back to the academy. Sensei, why are there only 2 bells for the 3 of us? Because, Himiko, one of you gets sent back to the academy anyway. Himiko gasped, horrified at the idea that she and her friend might get separated through this test. Naruto, seeing the look of horror on her face, simply hugged her from behind, putting his 2 hands together on her belly, pulling her to rest on his hard body. She blushed, and then moaned lightly, as he licked her neck briefly, before seeming to snap out of it, and whispering in her ear, the hot breath on her ear, making her eyes glaze over in lust. Himiko-chan, this is a test, remember? There has never been a 2-man genin team in Konoha. This is all meant to set us up, making it hard for us to create effective teamwork, which is really what the test is all about. We can forget about the Uchiha working with us. I don't even want his help seeing how disgusting he acts toward you, so I'll keep him busy. Will you sneak up from behind and steal the bells? You've got cat-like sneaking skills, don't you? Himiko relaxed against his body, nodding while blushing heavily. If they weren't in public, she might have kissed him right now. His presence was so intoxicating. Kakashi looked wary at Naruto, seeing what an intense effect he had on the green-haired girl. Alright then, you have 3 hours, begin. Naruto simply remained where he was, softly nibbling on her ear, making her blush even more, as she moaned quietly at his ministrations. The Uchiha theme. What dope? Why don't you go first? Don't you want to fight him? After he beats you up, I'll fight him. I want to relax for a little while longer. Himiko suddenly realized what an effect the blonde had on her. She was reacting to his ministrations like she was in heat. Her father had once told him that that was a sign of true love, and that she should hold on to it forever. As the Uchiha got his ass kicked, Naruto whispered quietly into her ear, Himiko-chan. After I start to fight him, there will be a moment at first when he's amazed by my power. You should use that moment to take the bells, but don't tell him that you stole them. I want to fight him. Yes, Naruto-kun, she said, breathing heavily, as he slowly licked her neck. Low and quiet moans could be heard from her, as she bit her lips to quiet herself. As the fight between Sasuke and Kakashi was finally over, Naruto stepped towards the copy nin who glared at him, demanding to know why he didn't help Sasuke. It's quite simple, sensei. Sasuke hates me, Himiko, and I dislike him severely, but we would be willing to set our differences aside in favor of passing this test, as a team. However, Sasuke clearly specified yesterday that he didn't need us to pass this test, and that we should stay out of his way. I decided to do as he asked, as getting some humility into him is a high priority on this team, plus I don't like how he looks at my girl. He whispered the last part so that only Kakashi could hear it. He looked at the girl only to find that she was gone. Very well then, that reason is acceptable. Now come at me. Naruto's face turned expressionless, as he recited his first move Hikarigen. Tenchi. Light release, angel. Kakashi's eyes widened to an impossible degree, and he didn't notice that the bells were stolen away. Above Naruto's head a halo of golden light materialized, and with a bright light behind him 2 white angel wings formed behind his back. With 2 flaps he lifted off slightly before landing gently on the ground again. What are you? I'm an angel, obviously. He pointed his left hand towards Kakashi, his hand in a stance, as if he was holding his sword, before reciting Sword of the Light, and a white stream of energy shot out, and stopped at the length of 4 feet. Naruto was basically holding a bright white bar, seeming to be pulsing with power. Himiko for her part just looked astonished at the blonde's appearance. He truly looked like an angel. That must be it. She thought he must be an angel. He's so nice and hot, and I already love him. After only 2 days of knowing him, she had already started a plan to get him. But then she remembered that he didn't really care about his fangirls. However, he did seem to care about her. Maybe she should just take everything he is willing to give. Maybe I'll start by kissing him. Kakashi looked slack-jawed at the blonde in front of him. He just couldn't comprehend why he looked like that. He was however rudely awakened out of his reverie when Naruto spoke. Universal power limiter. 5%. Kakashi Swedrapoy, you won't get the bells if you don't come with intent to kill, you know. Naruto looked him over, sizing him up, before sighing. How many times are you stronger than that? I would guess about 10 times. Very well. Universal power limiter. 20%. Suddenly Naruto disappeared, before appearing behind the. Kakashi wasn't able to react in time due to his shock, and he was only able to evade the worst of the slash. The gash on his stomach appeared, the heat of the light sword burning his wounds shut after causing severe burns. After Kakashi came to his senses, he decided to release his limiters. He would have to take Naruto seriously. Naruto noticed that Kakashi was suddenly speeding up, and just stood observing the speedy. Well, you are certainly a speedy one, aren't you? Speed limiter 40%. As suddenly as Kakashi's advantage appeared, it disappeared. Kakashi couldn't believe that Naruto was only using 20% of his power, and 40% of his speed. This is insane. It shouldn't be possible for an academy student to be this strong. He was starting to suspect that Naruto was quickly approaching cage level, or maybe he has already reached that level. Naruto slashed with his sword, and a blade of light flew out, and Kakashi's arm, his eyes widened, as it had sliced right through some of the skin on his arm, leaving his arm with an indentation, as blood flowed out before the wound was gauzed over due to the heat. Kakashi took out a kunai, and threw it at a young man, who just simply flapped his wings, sending a gust of wind to knock the kunai away from him. Naruto simply raised his hand, and a bright white flash blinded the, disorienting him long enough for Naruto to bind his hands, and place a kunai at his neck. Healed. Kakashi couldn't do a Karen, as the chakra flow to his hands was blocked. He simply lowered his hands, and reluctantly yielded, feeling ashamed that he was beaten so easily by a fresh genin. Naruto just flashed away next to Himiko, hugging her to him from behind, eliciting a smile from the young girl, as she settled into his arms with a sigh, blushing slightly at the affection she was receiving. Kakashi just blinked. Don't you want the bells? Teamwork sensei, that was the idea behind this test. I simply had Himiko-chan sneak up on you using her cat-like abilities, while you were gaping like a fish at my angel form, and had her steal the bells. I just wanted to measure your strength in battle, sensei, he said, putting his hands inside the young girl's pants pocket, making her blush prettily, as she gasped quietly, before taking out the 2 bells, and holding them up for Kakashi to see. Kakashi looked down to his belt to see the bells missing. He looked closer, seeing Himiko grin cutely, while Naruto was busying himself with nibbling on her ear. She closed her eyes, and gasped, as her blush deepened. You did very well, Himiko-chan. I can see that we will be working great together. He moved his hand over her stomach, drawing small circles on it, mentally chuckling, as he heard a quiet moan escape her mouth. He knew how much she was enjoying this. For some reason he just couldn't keep his hands off her. It was almost like with Harumi-chan, but slightly less potent. Alright, you pass. See me tomorrow for your first mission. Himiko leaned further into his body, before whispering lustfully, Naruto-kan wants to hang out today. Naruto whispered softly into her ear, Himiko-chan, did you really think I was just going to leave you now? No way am I really comfortable like this. Me too, Naruto-kan. Sasuke had already left. He was still bleeding from the wounds he received, and had to go to the hospital. Himiko suddenly turned around, looking into his warm blue eyes, getting lost. She didn't notice that her face was inching closer to his. She closed the distance between their lips, and moaned into his mouth. He caressed her mouth with his, lustfully nipping at her bottom lip, requesting entrance into her mouth, which she happily granted him. He plunged his tongue into her mouth, being rewarded with a blissful moan, as he held him to her closer. Happy to oblige, she stepped closer into him, snaking one of her arms around his waist, the other around his neck, massaging his scalp, gaining her a slight groan in pleasure from the blonde angel. After minutes he left her mouth, trailing kisses down her neck, making her moan louder, for everyone to hear, as she was no longer muffled by his mouth on hers. Oh, Naruto-kun, that feels good. He simply grinned into her neck. She was his now, and with her clan's views on one man having multiple women, he wouldn't have any problem keeping it that way. He snaked his hands under her shirt, making her stiffen for a moment. Naruto noticed this, and reassured her, whispering in her ear, don't worry, Himiko-chan, I'm not like the Uchiha. I won't force you to do anything. If you don't want me to, I won't rub your stomach like I wanted to. I simply thought you would enjoy it. I'm sorry, he said, as he began to pull his hand back from under her shirt, preparing to release her from his embrace before she relaxed, and pulled him to her once again, not wanting him to let go. No, it's okay, as long as you don't try anything dirty. You can rub my stomach, she said, blushing heavily at what she said. He simply tightened his embrace on her, snaking his hand under her shirt, placing it across her stomach. Thank you, Himiko-chan. You have no idea how much it means to me that you trust me so. He went back to kissing her neck, rubbing his hand on her bare stomach softly, eliciting gasps and moans from the lady beneath him. Her heart fluttered as she heard him thank her. She had been a bit reluctant to allow him to touch her stomach, but she was in love with him, and she didn't mind him touching her at all. In fact, she thoroughly enjoyed the ministrations he was laying on her. She didn't know how this love came to being, but she did know he reciprocated it fully, and even with the uncanny speed at which their relationship was progressing, she was content with the way things were going in the town she only arrived at a week ago. The next day, Team 7 had to catch Tora, a task that Naruto snorted at since it was easy for him. His pleasant feeling chakra, as opposed to the oppressive one of most ninjas, enabled him to just call the cat to him and pick her up as she purred while laying into his arms. All in all, it was an easy mission. Kamiko couldn't hang out with Naruto today, as she had to go buy things for her apartment. So Naruto simply went to hold his contest, which ended with Hinata Hyuga beating the crap out of all of the other girls. The motivation had clearly done well for her. He promised to pick her up later that day. And he even dressed up, as a bonus. He was wearing black slacks, with a blood-red blouse that was opened at the top, showing part of his chiseled chest. As he went to pick Hinata up, he saw her walking with her mother, and he was almost drooling at the sight of her mother. Hinata was walking in a purple dress, accentuating her curved C-cup breast bouncing slightly, as she walked excitedly towards him, but his sight rested on her for only a moment before he looked at her mother. She was skinny, but had used, at least H-cup. Her clothes accentuating her curves perfectly. He needed to have sex, and planned to do Hinata tonight, but he suddenly had a great, if somewhat cruel idea. He'd fuck her mother in front of her, and make her watch, and then he'd fuck her in front of her own mother, and he'd make them both pleasure him. As Naruto was devising his plan to bed 2 women at once, he couldn't help but feel bad that he was being so cruel. The best thing to do was ask Hinata if she thought it was alright, but then again, due to her charmed status, she couldn't object to anything he wanted to do. He stopped walking, and he got a glazed look into his eyes, so he decided to go ask Kurumi about what to do. As he appeared near the cage, she came running towards him, a somewhat cross look on her face, as she heard his problems. He flinched at seeing a frown flash across her features. He was saddened slightly, thinking he was alienating his love through his desire for passion. As she noticed his expression, she saddened a bit, but she couldn't help but feel that it was a bad idea to proceed on his planned course of action. Master, I think what you should do, since you cannot halt your desires, is to charm her mother, and then ask them both if they would have any objections, and if so, I think you should forget about the idea. It would be rather cruel to make them watch, as you screw the other, but if they don't mind, then there is no problem at all. You could always bed them separately, and try it again later. He nodded, slightly peeved that he came up with such a plan in the first place. Though it was cruel, it was also hot as hell, and he couldn't help but feel as if it would be the perfect cure for the lack of sex he had been experiencing. He decided to follow her suggestion, as it was the best way to not disappoint his love, and still sate his desire. Back in the real world, Hinata was starting to get worried. Naruto had gotten a glint in his eye, as he saw her, and her mother. A small grin appeared on his face before it turned into a frown. Then he simply stopped walking, and his eyes glazed over. She was currently waving her hand in front of his face, trying to get his attention. She was worried about the glint in his eye. She remembered a similar glint in the eyes of her kidnapper, as he was talking about her being used as breeding stock. Not that Naruto was going to rape her though. It was impossible for him to rape her, since she wanted him as well. Naruto knew that, so she was worried that he might want to do something to her that she might not like. She knew she would do it for him anyway, but she still didn't like the idea. Suddenly Naruto's gaze cleared up, and he grabbed her hand, startling her. Her mother looked on, worried about the boy. She had seen the glint, as well, which also seemed to be directed at her. It worried her greatly, but when the boy's eyes glazed over, and he simply stopped responding to anything, she thought that this was more of a thing to worry about. When the boy suddenly snapped his head up to look at her, she saw his cerulean blue eyes suddenly flash white for less than a second, making her feel all happy inside, as she saw the lust-filled look he was giving her. Hinata saw the strange look in his eyes, as he looked at her mother. But she had never experienced a look of lust before, so she simply accepted that the emotion he was displaying seemed to make her happy. Hinata, Kari. Would you be cross if I asked you two to have sex with me at the same time? Naruto said, with an uncomfortable expression on his face, one that shimmered with unbridled lust while also showing a bit of nervousness. He wouldn't know what they would answer after all. What he didn't know was that because the Hyuga clan looked down on everybody, their women had developed a slight fetish. They had come to love being treated as a lower being by the one they loved, and it had grown on them. Because of this quirk, they couldn't help but feel hot as the idea ran through their minds. They imagined themselves waiting hungry with lust, as Naruto was satisfying the other, having to endure seeing the face of ecstasy on someone else while they waited for their turn. They looked at each other for a moment, reading each other's eyes, as they made their decision. "And no, Naruto-kun, we wouldn't mind," came the shy voice of the smaller Hyuga, a blush like a Christmas tree glowing on her face. While the other just simply gazed at the blonde with a lusty look on her face, biting her lip, as she instantly grew wet at the idea, a tingling sensation between her legs that she had not experienced for over a year. Naruto's gaze lit up, as he heard their reaction, his confusion and doubts disappearing, as thoughts filled with lust flooded his mind, bristling with ideas for the two Hyuga. He simply grabbed both of them, and a bright flash later he appeared with them in his bedroom. He told Hinata to get naked, as he stood in front of them, and watched them with glazed eyes. Hinata complied, blushing at his intense gaze, as he watched her feelings appreciatively, making her grow all hot, as she took off her dress, revealing her in her underwear, her moderately sized breasts bouncing slightly, as they gained more freedom, gaining her a pleased smile from the blonde, which made her tingle between her legs. She took off her bra, making her breast bounce even more, stopping in a slightly raised position, showing the firmness of her globes. Pink nipples stood hard, eagerly awaiting the ministrations the blonde would eventually lavish on them. After a second of letting him admire her slim body and smooth curves, she took off her panties, revealing her glistening pink slit to the blonde in front of her, who whistled lowly in appreciation, earning him a blush. Naruto walked over to Hinata, planning to give her a taste of the pleasure still to come. He grabbed her chin, causing her to look up at him, her eyes glazed over, and her blush still strongly present. He kissed her hard on the lips, watching, as she quivered with pleasure from the kiss. He nipped at her bottom lip, and, as she opened her mouth to gasp, he plunged his tongue into her mouth. Mentally smirking, as he caught a whimper of pleasure, he deepened the kiss, sliding his tongue across her gums, before he caressed her tongue with his own. Stepping in closer to her, he grabbed one of her breasts with one hand, squeezing it softly before he took her nipple in his hand and rolled with his fingers, earning him a gasp and a soft shriek in pleasure. His other hand trailed down from her neck, in between her globes, slowly down, and after stimulating her stomach for a while, he dipped his hands lower, softly tracing her slit with one finger, which made her knees buckle before she regained her control over her legs, simply moaning into his mouth. Suddenly he brushed his fingers against her clit, wanting to hear more moans from the young woman. He got exactly what he wanted, as her moans in his mouth suddenly increased in volume. He slowly inserted a finger into her wet, thrusting it in with utmost care, making sure not to hurt the virgin girl. As the moans only increased, he slipped another finger in, feeling her walls constricting them instantly. He smirked, as he suddenly pushed his fingers in the entire way, eliciting a short moan before she cringed in pain, her hymen broken from the sudden intrusion. He felt bad for her, but knew it had to be done, so he wiggled his fingers around inside of her for a while, stretching her new opening, so that she wouldn't be torn in two later on. Slowly the pain whimpers subsided, and were replaced by moans of pleasure, as she started to grind her hips into his finger, intent on getting off. Naruto grinned evilly, and pulled his fingers out of her, earning a disappointed look from the young woman in front of him. I know you want to, but I also know you get off on being treated like a whore, so why don't you get on your knees on the floor, and wait, as me and Kari show you how it's done. Oh, and don't touch yourself, I want to have your first orgasm. She blushed and nodded, getting on her hands and knees, a lustful expression on her face, as she had to restrain herself from finishing the job. Kari looked on with hungry eyes. She saw how Naruto made Hinata like putty in his hands with just a few touches. She also saw the large bulge in his pants, licking her lips at the thought of having that inside of her. In her pants she was drenched in her own juices, her pants were beginning to soak, and a damp lusty scent filled the air, evidence of her arousal. Her eyes were half-lidded, but she suddenly opened them wide, as Naruto turned towards her. He told her to let him take her clothes off. It was a bit odd, but she complied nevertheless, not wanting to make the boy cross with her. Naruto walked up to her, opening her kimono from the front, before sliding it off her shoulders, before he snaked his hands under her shirt, unclasping her bra, as he slid it out from under her clothes, while he caressed her back, causing her breathing to quicken at the pleasure his simple movements were causing. As the bra slipped from under her clothes, you could clearly see the hardened nipples pushing against the shirt, desperately trying to get out, and regain their freedom. Deciding to let her keep the undershirt for now, he told her to get on her knees next to the edge of the bed. He took off his shirt and pants, leaving them to drool at his abs, and at the size of the bulge, straining against its confines. He removed his last article of clothing, thoroughly amused, as the two females were trying to hold severe nosebleeds at the perverse thoughts in their heads. As his member was finally free from the restrictions of his underwear, it stood tall, ready for action. He sat on the edge of the bed, and told Hinata to watch, as Kari sucked him off. Hinata crawled across the floor, getting a good view of his members from a smaller distance. She watched in awe, as his 11-inch banana stood proud, veins bulging. As her mother slowly approached him, she couldn't help but feel jealous, as her mother got to him first. It was supposed to be her date with Naruto after all. But, as she was a Hyuga, being ordered to wait, and not pleasure yourself was quite a turn-on for the young girl. Kari crawled seductively over to Naruto's banana, swinging her hips more than necessary, as she kept her eyes focused slowly on his magnificent banana. She grabbed the base with her hands, slowly pumping it, as she licked his head seductively, causing him to groan in approval, before he looked at her with a gaze that told her not to tease him. His stern gaze only turned the woman on more, increasing the tingling in her nether regions. She took his head in her mouth, sucking on it gently, as she moved her tongue round with great skill, swirling around it, while her tip trailed the underside. She slowly began bobbing her head, feeling hands rest on the back of her head, shivering with lust, as she remembered he wasn't going to be gentle. In preparation she relaxed her throat, preparing herself for an onslaught. Sure enough, his hold on her head suddenly tightened, before pulling her towards the base at great speeds. Naruto began to ram her head over his banana. He fell into utter bliss every time he reached her throat, as she would release moans, the vibrations massaging his banana even more. He was surprised that she wasn't even coughing or resisting, but chalked it up to her being abused like that regularly. His opinion of the Hyuga males dropped, as he realized that they all abused their wives like this, but he did it anyway, as it had become their sexual fantasy. Pulling out her trump card, Kari made her cheeks converge on the boy, while still keeping her throat relaxed. It started to feel slightly like an actual, only the constricting force was much weaker. He groaned, as he could feel pressure building up inside him. Knowing he was close to his limit, Kari decided to pull one last stunt, as she channeled chakra into her mouth, basically multiplying his pleasure. He moaned his approval, as his banana twitched before unleashing a mighty torrent of his seed right into her mouth. He was surprised, as she swallowed nearly everything, leaving the valley of her breasts wet with slick sperm. He told her to get up and remove her shirt for him. As she did so, her breasts were pulled up with the shirt, before falling back down, as they lost their grip on the cloth, leaving them jiggling heavily, as the blonde looked at them with lust in his eyes, sending the tingling in between her legs to a whole new level, as she smiled merrily, happy that her orbs left him in a daze. He hadn't told her what to do next yet, so she simply decided to take action. She laid gently on him, grinding her core against his still erect member. Before pulling him in for a kiss, she moaned into the kiss, as her boobs pressed themselves against his chest, stimulating her nipples slightly. Naruto soon took control, and flipped them over, deepening the kiss, as he slowly massaged her large breasts, causing her moans to increase. Hinata watched with envious eyes, as she saw how much pleasure he was giving her mother. It made her feel low, as she was just being ignored, forced to watch her own mother have sex with her, hopefully, future boyfriend. She was naked in Naruto's house, for crying out loud. The least he could do was pay attention to her. Yet, as much as it made her feel depressed, it also turned her on greatly, causing her to drip with her own juices. She could only hope that he would make her feel great pleasure like before. Her eyes glazed over, as she remembered the pleasure he had bestowed upon her mere minutes before, her mouth hanging open slightly, as she began drooling. Her slit dripped faster, as her juices were mass-produced. Naruto growled slowly, as his advances were stopped by the hem of her pants. They were secured tightly, preventing any entrance from him unless removed properly. However, her moans were urging him on, and he didn't want to pleasure. Removing his lips from hers, he moved himself down, tugging on her pants with both hands, as he sucked greedily on her ample bosom, slowly reaching the nipple, her volume increasing instantly, as he did so. She lifted her hips up while arching her back, as she wallowed in pleasure, allowing him to tug her pants down in one swift motion. He had to restrain a nosebleed, as he looked her over once, and found that after a minute his body was only continuing his ministrations on autopilot, removing the vigor his touch held before. Quickly renewing his assault of pleasure, he brought his lips back to hers, caressing her breasts once more, while moving his hands towards her panties. Mentally smirking at the feeling of her soaked panties, he rubbed her softly, relishing in the moans she was releasing into his mouth, as she arched her back in pleasure, as she started to grind herself into him. He removed his lips from hers, and smirked against her neck, as he started to suck on a certain sensitive spot on her neck, and slipped his fingers inside of her panties, softly pinching the clit, as he went on to insert 2 fingers slowly into her cunt. She cried out, and he felt her body tense up for a moment, before convulsing in pleasure, letting out an ear-shattering scream, as her juices gushed out of her, drenching his entire hand along with a small patch of the bed. He went on to position his length in front of her entrance, watching, as she tried to arch her hips in the direction of his tool. He held her hips in place, teasing her without end, just waiting for the point that she would start begging him to fuck her. She tried for a while longer before realizing that struggling against his grip was futile, and just relaxed, before she looked up at him with a sultry smile before begging him, her voice husky, and full of lust, sexy enough to instantly down a normal man through a huge nosebleed. Please fuck me, Naruto-kun. Please slid your large tool inside of me, and use my holes until they can't be used anymore. Please just fuck me, I need you inside of me. Naruto grinned, and released her hips, slowly pushing forward. Her folds were pushed open by his erection, as he slowly buried it inside of her. As he got the head inside, he suddenly thrust it all the way inside of her, making her moan in ecstasy, as she was suddenly filled completely. He pulled out almost completely, making her whimper at the lost feeling of being full. He then suddenly slammed himself inside her again, before almost pulling out slowly. The intense burst of pleasure followed by his pulling out were driving her crazy. It made her feel really good, but she couldn't quite reach her climax from this. Naruto for his part just chuckled, and grinned evilly. He couldn't come from this pace either, but it was fun seeing her squirm from the short bursts of pleasure. Please Naruto-kun, faster. He smiled at her, making her blush, before complying, quickening his pace, watching, as her breasts bounced every time he filled her completely. She began to feel a pressure building inside her, begging for release, but the current pace wasn't fast enough for her. Even though some virgin girls would have come by now, her threshold was heightened by her having bared 2 children. Already she begged him once again to step it up, and he did, gradually quickening his pace, slowly starting to slam harder into her willing heat. Grunting out, as he was also starting to feel a pressure build, he relished in her loud moans, her screaming, and her bouncing breasts. His release slowly approaching, he suddenly doubled his thrusting speed, while driving himself into her deeper with every thrust. Her moans and screams instantly increased in volume. As her release finally came, her walls clenched his member, trying to milk it from its coom, but nothing came, and, as a stream of her juices met his member she didn't notice. She was constantly screaming, as she rode out the waves of her orgasm. Naruto just continued to slam into her mercilessly, ignoring the pressure inside of him, thrusting even harder and faster, prolonging her orgasm. He put one hand on her breast, massaging the nipple softly, rolling it around in his finger, making her moan. As she finished her orgasm, soon a pressure started to build inside of her again from the ministrations of both her nipple and her cunt. He continued to thrust until they both moaned out each other's names as they came together. Naruto lay down on Kari's chest, softly laying a kiss on her lips, as she just lay there in a daze from 2 consecutive orgasms. After a few minutes Naruto told Kari that it was her turn to watch, but he told her to wait until after he got Hinata. He silently got up seeing Hinata with her head lowered to the ground. Her face was set in sadness and longing, her eyes showed lust with a hint of sadness. Her body was shaking, showing that it needed its release badly, but she had obeyed his order not to pleasure herself, though with great reluctance. He silently walked up to her, pulling her up to his level, watching, as the sadness in her eyes gained a bit of hope. He slowly pulled her towards him, grabbing the back of her head. As he brought her in for a tender kiss, her face changed to an expression of happiness at the affection she finally received, and his arms moved on their own. One of her arms grabbed the back of Naturo's head, massaging his scalp while she moaned into the kiss. He stepped in closer to her, pressing her breasts against his chest, as she moaned louder. Her other arm snaked its way down to his member, slowly massaging it, feeling happy when she gained a groan from him. His other hand made its way down to her, slowly brushing against it before he slid one finger inside. He mentally chuckled, as she literally shook with pleasure, almost screaming out her pleasure into his mouth. The tone of her moans was intoxicating to him, turning him on even more. He also noted that she was submissive even into the kiss, thinking only about what he would like. A little bit like Harumi, only Hinata could never hope to surpass his first love. Then again he thought, what woman could ever hope to actually surpass a woman with a perfect body that only cares about me, only loves me, and makes me feel something inside that no one except maybe Himiko had been able to make him feel. Inside of the seal Harumi felt her heart grow warm, a dreamy smile on her face. Her happiness was barely contained. She just wanted to thank her master for his love and his forgiveness, since he viewed a demon as superior to human girls, something she had never thought possible. She thought that once his love life would pick up speed he would quickly forget about her. Naruto she realized wasn't like that, and, as much as she hated herself for doubting him, she could only feel love at the moment, as well as a little bit of shame. All he did was shower her with love, and she returned the love, though she was never sure if it would last, though at this moment she realized that unless she pissed him off, he would want to be with her always. Shrugging off his thoughts he continued to pleasure Hinata, making sure to do it slowly so she wouldn't come yet. Her moans grew louder steadily, but he knew that these moans were meant to encourage him to give her the release she so desired. Picking her up he carried her towards the bed. Laying her down softly he felt her gasp, as she was suddenly lying down. His mouth left her lips, causing her moans to sound out louder because they were no longer caught in his mouth. He slowly licked her neck, before kissing it, moving down slowly, leaving kisses along the way. He moved to her left nipple, sucking lightly on it while nipping it softly, causing her to gasp, before she let out a loud moan. He pulled his hand out of her, causing a disappointed whimper to escape her lips, smiling at the hungry look in her eyes. He slowly brought his finger to his mouth before sucking on one seductively, causing her to moan in want, as her eyes glazed over from lust. He groaned from the taste, causing a shudder to pass through her body. Pulling his finger out with an audible plop, he licked his lips before sucking the other finger into his mouth. He groaned again, closing his eyes. "You taste heavenly, Hinata, I desire more," she gasped, as he moved immediately, moving down, so her wet slit was directly in front of his face. He sniffed her scent a bit. "You smell great too." Her face erupted in a blush from the embarrassment of him smelling her, before it suddenly erupted in ecstasy, as his tongue probed her wet folds, entirely focused on pressing his tongue directly onto her walls, lapping up the tasty liquid with his tongue. Not noticing the effect on Hinata, she was screaming her lungs out, having never been pleasured like this before. His actions were driving her crazy, the pressure on her folds shifting, as she relished in the approving groans that he gave her. She arched her hips, trying to push her slit further into his face. She wrapped her legs around his head, basically restricting his movements, as he greedily lapped up her bodily fluids. Not that he minded. He could now loosen the force he used to press his head into her slit, concentrating all of his effort into tasting her more. He was happy when he suddenly heard a scream, and she tensed, before a sudden flood of her heavenly juices assaulted him, making him groan loudly in pleasure. As the sudden flood of taste overloaded his senses, he immediately got hard again. Deciding to fuck her right now instead of teasing her more, he positioned his erection right in front of her slit, rubbing it against her, making her moan in anticipation, sliding slowly into her. She suddenly cringed. He felt bad for her, but he had to know if it was better to wait, so he decided to thrust into her in one stroke. She screamed in pain, as Naruto continued to move slowly inside of her, but the pain quickly ebbed away into pleasure, and she came on his banana. A bit surprised that she came that quickly, he decided that he could go faster now, and picked up his pace, watching, as the pleasure assaulted all of her senses, and she just lay there, her eyes rolled back into her head. Her tongue lolled out of her mouth, as she screamed in pleasure. Her tightness was unreal, he had not expected any less of a virgin, but somehow her clenching her muscles like that, made her holds that much tighter. He groaned, quickening his pace, and slamming into her harder. He was quickly greeted by another orgasm. Feeling her legs clenched around his waist, he chuckled, before caressing her nipple with his tongue, and her other nipple with his hand. Hearing another shriek, she came again. She was very sensitive indeed. After a while, he felt a pressure built inside of him, and he came into her, sending her into her 5th orgasm that night. Lying on his back, he groaned, as Kari was giving him a while Hinata was kissing him passionately, and he thought, I sure could get used to this. Before he mentally smirked. He decided that he would keep Hinata around. For some reason her juices tasted like a delicious wine. He wondered if he should ask her to gather her own juices for him, as a drink. Deciding he would think about it later, he told the woman that he was tired. The effects were immediately, as Hinata got on his left side. He held her close, as he rested his head on Kari's tits, gaining an affectionate moan from the older woman, as they all drifted off to sleep. The next day Naruto met Himiko shortly before she got to the training ground that they use as a meeting spot. Himiko's face was set in a depression, but, as she saw Naruto her face quickly lit up in a smile. She had missed the boy. She regretted that she couldn't stay with him yesterday. It had only been 3 weeks since her entire family was murdered, and she thought she needed the day to be alone, to process the fact. But, as the day went on, she realized that this was the worst choice she could have made. She broke down crying as soon as she got home, and had moped around the house, feeling utterly horrible for the entire day. Maybe if Naruto was there he would have been able to comfort her. She had underestimated the boy, because he had seen her still red cheeks from the crying she had done yesterday. He instantly appeared in front of her, grabbing her head into a deep kiss, causing her to moan in the sudden, but very pleasurable contact between her and the man she had feelings for. After the kiss had ended, he pressed his forehead to hers, and asked her what was wrong with her. The first thing he asked was if Uchiha had violated her, which she answered a quick no to, seeing him sigh in relief before he turned tense again. He asked her again what was wrong. She broke down, and just told him the entire story of her clan's death, the torture, the slaughtering of her nin companions, and the lifeless bodies of her parents and brother. His eyes softened, as she just broke down in front of her. Although he had no way of completely taking away the pain, he only hoped that he could help her slowly get over the pain of losing everything in her life, and not turn out like the bastard Uchiha. He tightened his embrace, and leaned his mouth next to her ear, and resisted the urge to lick her neck lustfully, as it would be terribly insensitive to act lustfully towards a girl that is busy having an emotional breakdown about a massacre that she had almost been a victim of. He breathed softly on her ear before whispering softly into her ear. Himiko-chan, you don't have to keep appearances up for me. I understand what it's like to bottle up such feelings. I wish I could have prevented the massacre, but I didn't know that it was happening. Otherwise I would have decimated them for you, simply because I don't want to see you in this much pain. I should annihilate Kiri for this transgression. She shuddered at his hot breath on her ear, and felt strangely aroused by his threat to annihilate the bastard who had caused her emotional pain. But she wasn't so sure that he was kidding. He sounded like he was completely serious. Was he actually willing to wage war on a whole country just because it had hurt her? She felt slightly better, but she couldn't help but feel sad, as she softly sobbed in his arms, keeping her eyes closed, and her head buried in the crook of his neck. After 15 minutes she had cried her heart out. She felt slightly better, and immensely thankful to the blonde who had consoled her in her hour of need. She glomped at him, thanking him profusely before straddling him, kissing him deeply, as they were both situated on the floor. Just at that moment Sasuke decided to arrive, standing still for a moment with a look of shock on his face. He growled, and charged at the two on the ground with a kunai in hand, intending to end Naruto's life for taking his girl. Naruto, however, saw this coming, and formed his wings and halo. Taking an unsuspecting Himiko into his arm, he blocked Sasuke's attack, before flexing his wing, throwing him right into a tree, knocking him unconscious in the process. Himiko's eyes widened. She felt two surprisingly warm wings wrapping around her before she spotted the halo on the boy's head. Feeling even more comfortable in his embrace, she deepened the kiss, slipping her tongue into his mouth, moaning at the sensation of the kiss, coupled with the warm wings on her back wrapped protectively around them. She was in the embrace of an angel. Kakashi suddenly popped up, seeing the two wings wrapped around something. He whistled, as the wings released their captor, showing Himiko in a passionate kiss with Naruto, her hands holding the back of his head, as her other hand was under his shirt on his stomach, her whole body pressed up against the young man. He currently had one hand under her shirt on her back, and the other was currently pressed against her cheek, as the two battled tongues furiously, obviously filled with passion. As they broke up, Naruto walked over to the downed Himiko still in his arms, before kicking him in the chest, waking him up, but not before smashing him into the trees once more. Sasuke groaned in pain before slowly getting up, glaring angrily at the blonde, who just released his commanding presence to the point that it felt like every breath you took was like trying to move a 100-pound weight with only your breathing muscles, and he said, "Uchiha, if you ever try to kill me again, especially when I'm having a special moment with Himiko, or if you ever try to touch her, you're going to be begging me to kill you. Got it?" The Uchiha tried to look threatening, but the effect was lost, as he was shaking in fear at the blonde before him. He was barely able to breathe. He was barely able to mumble out an affirmative before he collapsed. Good. Kakashi looked at Naruto with an angry expression on his face. He demanded to know why Sasuke had been treated this way. Naruto just turned his angry glare on Kakashi, before he ground out, "I was making out with Himiko-chan, and when this fool arrived he attempted to murder me for taking his Himiko, and I won't tolerate anybody trying to kill me," interrupting a passionate moment, or talking about Himiko-chan like she's an object. Himiko for her part just sighed in happiness that she had chosen such an affectionate man as her lover, even though it was not yet known to Naruto. Himiko had decided she would have him no matter what, even if she had to betray Konoha or share him with 100 other girls. He was hers. Kakashi looked at the last Uchiha like he was a pile of shit. He had not expected the last Uchiha to be that much of a selfish prick with a god complex. He was almost regretting passing the Uchiha, but seeing, as it would also have meant failing Naruto and Himiko, who would most likely not be on the same team the next time, and appeared to be in love, he couldn't just revoke his decision and decide to fail them, even though they were already genin. Alright then, in light of these new developments, I have to talk to the Hokage about the regrettable developments in Sasuke's psyche. I am absolutely horrified that he would drive his pathetic affections for Himiko this far, and I'm sorry that I wasn't here earlier to be able to stop this atrocity from happening. Let's go do some D-rank missions, and then have a date or something. See you tomorrow. The end. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.